What's up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I just want to have a discussion with you guys just about something I was thinking about while on the treadmill. Like, just some random thoughts that were coming to my head about deck building. I just want to share sort of my thoughts on deck building, what it means to deck build, and how we can sort of change our deck building process to maximize our results for the most part. I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting just to think about it as a mental exercise. And again, I just want to share with you guys. And so, the first thing I was really just thinking about was, like, what does it mean to deck build? Like, what does it mean to build a deck, right? So I think obviously you want to put 40 to 60 cards together and hope that it gives you the best results possible, right? But I think a better definition of really what I was thinking was that deck building is a process to where you try to approximate the results of an infinite set of matches and then make decisions to improve the results in another infinite set of matches or subset of those. And so, like, a subset of an infinite set of matches could mean like your locals, a regional, or any other tournament, but you're making those decisions based off what would be best in like an infinite series of matches. Like, if you played a million games, what would be better? So pretty much disregarding variance. But then the paradox, though, is that tournaments are not infinite games. And so, like, most of our goals are winning tournaments. Like, we all want to win some tournament. We want to win locals. We want to win our regional. We want to win, whatever we're trying to play at that current moment in the short term. But we usually deck build for the long term. And so your results in any given subset can be vastly different than the results ad infinitum. And so it's really sort of a dichotomy to how we need to go about our deck building, because there are different ways to do that. And, like, we can deck build for the short term, or you can deck build for the long term, but your results are largely out of your control in that case. And so, like, if you wanted to deck build for the short term, you could just go for a lot of variance and then hope that you just get lucky. And that's like a very viable thing. It's why sometimes, like, at your locals, you see like these random decks that just do these crazy plays, and sometimes they win. But a lot of times they aren't as viable at like a regional, because it's not going to work in like 7, 8, 9 rounds. And so that's sort of the difference between deck building for like a short set of games versus an infinite set of games, or a longer set of games. But another issue is that you really can't account for the randomness and lack of randomness in tournament play. And so it's really this variance that causes difficulty in our deck building, and it really is one of the differences between like what we would expect in an infinite number of games and what happens in a subset of those. I think one of the things that causes variance, for one, is just the nature of deck building itself. And so, because building a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and really just any card game deck, what you draw is very statistical, and so you can't really control what you draw. Now, because of the way the game works, and we can play a certain number of different cards, because of the numbers and the ratios of cards that we play, we can control to an extent what we draw, but we can't control the specifics. And so that alone adds a lot of variance. Something else that we can't control are our opponent's decks and the associated variance with their decks. And so that's really two different things. And so with us, of course, we can control our own deck, but we can't control the variance of what we draw. But with our opponents, we can't like sit down from our opponent and tell them to play a certain deck. Like, we can't tell our opponents to, hey, I want you to play SPYRAL, I want you to play Magician, I want you to play X deck or Y deck. We can't do that. And so largely what we play against, which matchups are a thing in this game, and so what you play against will influence your win rate, which makes it hard to really isolate results from real matches. It's something that you can't control, and so it's something that we also have to account for. And then with that, we also have to account for the variance in our opponent's decks, which is, again, something we can't really account for. Like, sometimes your opponent's just like open broken, and you can't do anything about that. Next, we have the die roll. Again, that's something that we kind of have control over, but not really. And then finally, another cause of variance is the technical and mental play of both players. And so once again, variance, I think we can define in this regard as the difference between what we would expect in an infinite set of matches and what happens in a subset of those. And I think the above 4 or 5 reasons are a lot of the major reasons why there are differences. And so again, if I forgot anything, please let me know in the comment section below, because again, this isn't an all-inclusive list. I think this is just a pretty good discussion and mental exercise for both myself and for a lot of you guys. I think now that we've sort of discussed what I think the causes of variance are, we can begin to eliminate them so that we can ideally get our games that we would expect from an infinite set of matches to be closer to what actually happens. And so that's what it would mean to have pretty much our deck building be perfect. So if you have perfect deck building, what you are planning to happen actually happens. And so that's what we're shooting for here. So I just want to sort of discuss some of the ways where I think we could decrease the variance. So I'm just going to go in order. And so first we talked about the nature of deck building, and then also the variance in our own decks. And so I think we could really account for the variance in our own decks by just following some of the deck building rules that are really established within the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Things like not playing too many cards of the same nature, not playing too many normal summons, etc. I think that's one way that we can account for that, like reducing the number of engine requirements. There's just a lot of ways that we can do that, and just really just rounding out your deck. Like a really well-balanced deck really has a lot of 3-ofs, not very many 1-ofs. And those are the type of decks where you're getting a lot of the same thing every single time, and really reducing the variance, because every different card that you play in your deck gives you more different combinations of cards that are possible to draw, and that increases your variance. Next we talked about the opponent's decks, and this is something that again we can't directly control, but what we can do is account for our opponent's decks via metagaming. And so that's what it means to really look at the format and then make decisions in your deck choice and your deck building based on that. And so like, if you go to your locals one week and you see that there's a lot of magicians, maybe next week you come back with some barriers in your side deck. Maybe you play Cosmic Cyclone in your main deck, or certain changes to help you combat what you're expecting the format to be like. And so by metagaming, you can sort of account for what your opponent's deck is, and thus reduce some of the variance in that regard. But however, this does carry a risk of playing against decks that you don't prepare for, and if you were to do that, then it might make you weaker in those matchups. And so by attempting to decrease the variance in this way, it can hurt you in other ways. So like, if you're expecting a lot of Pendulum and you say, hey, I'm gonna main deck Barrier, and then you play Spirals all next week, well, that Barrier is gonna be pretty bad in that matchup. And yeah, well, sure, you can side it out, yeah, maybe you do other things with it, it's not gonna be ideal, and it is gonna detract away from what you would like to do. Oh, that's also something I hear all the time. Like I hear people that will play a bad card and they say, well, at least it can do this. At least it's okay if I discard it for X card, or at least, you know, it's good in some other way. But you have to think about the opportunity cost of playing a card. And so even though a card may not be terrible, even though there may be other uses for it, the opportunity cost is playing something that might be just outright better. And that's something that you have to think about as well. But also keep in mind the tournament structure. And so like in the earlier rounds, you're much more likely to play against rogue decks than you are in the later rounds. So like in rounds 1, 2, or even 3, you can really play anything, and it's all really sort of the luck of the draw. And like, while if you have a better record, like if you're 3-0, you're more likely to play a good deck than if you're 1-2. But after round 4 and 5, you're really playing similar decks to what your record is. And if you're winning, you're going to be playing the top decks. So that's something to be on the lookout for. So that's pretty much all you can do for preparing for the type of deck that your opponent's playing. As for the variance of their individual deck, there really unfortunately isn't much you can do. Like if your opponent opens up the specific answers to stop your deck, then, you know, too bad, tough luck, it happens. And sometimes that's gonna happen to you. Like sometimes you're gonna draw really good, sometimes your opponent's gonna draw really good. But the most likely scenario is for both players to draw relatively average. And so, yeah, that's what you have to really prepare for. Not for the times where your opponent opens the crazy 5-card combo. Next we have the die roll, which is something that is being accounted for more and more in recent months, which is, I think, one of the biggest trends in deck building lately. Much more than any other individual thing, I think people accounting for the die roll is something that's been huge lately. Especially with the release of Evenly Matched and the increasing number of hand traps that more and more decks are adapting to be able to go second. And I think that's actually a very interesting development, because you always want to be able to assume that you're going to be going either first or second, because again, that allows you to get rid of the variance and allows you to deck build a certain way. So like if you can assume you're going second every single game, then it makes cards like Evenly Matched and hand traps a lot better in your main deck. It makes cards like Spiral Tough and like the Go Second Spiral deck really good, whereas they aren't really good going first. And so if you can be sure that you're going to be going second, you can play cards that are good going second. And likewise, if you're pretty sure you're going to be going first a lot of games, you can play cards that are really good going first. I think Solemn Judgment is going to be one of the big changes that people play going first now. That's been limited again. And so being able to assume that you're going first or second in most of your games allows you to make better deck building decisions. But be wary of your deck's capabilities though. And so a lot of times it comes down to more than pretty much just like, can you play some Evenly Matches and some hand traps? Like just playing Evenly Matches and hand traps doesn't make your deck good at going second. In the same way that just playing a lot of regular traps doesn't make your deck very good going first. And it's far more complex than that, and it really comes down to the individual things about your deck. And so rather than making space for cards that don't really fit your archetype, you really want to just analyze your deck better. Like, there's a reason why Ghost Second Spirals were so popular, and that there wasn't any other relevant Ghost Second deck. Like, there's a reason why there weren't like Ghost Second Trickstars and Ghost Second, I don't know, there weren't really that many other decks last format now that I think about it, but there's a reason why like Spirals was the only deck that was really going second, and that's because they had an engine that could accommodate that type of strategy. They had cards like Tough, they had cards like Super Agent, they had ways to play through your opponent's disruption and still make plays. And so that is one of the reasons why they could do that. But not all decks have that luxury, and if you don't have that luxury, then you do have to prepare to go first. And again, if it's the format where you can do that, then it's going to give you a very good advantage. But if it's not, you're going to have to account for that variance. So again, just keep your deck's characteristics and capabilities in mind when deck building, because if you can make a decision on whether you're going first or second, it's going to allow you to make really good decisions. It's going to help you out a lot. But if you make the incorrect decision, it's very likely to yield poor results. The next thing I want to talk about was just sort of mental and technical play, because it's one of the sources of variance, but in a lot of cases you really have to just assume that both players will make the correct play. And unfortunately we know that that's not always true, but you can't account for that in your deck building because you can't control the actions of your opponents. And it's something I see all the time, honestly, in weaker players. Something I see a lot of I don't want to say bad players think and do, but I see it a lot. And I see it all the time to where they want to play a certain card to be unique or to be innovative, or they think that their opponent won't see it coming, or say, it has a surprise factor. But I just think that's absolutely false. I don't think that a surprise factor exists in this game, and one of the reasons for that is because you're allowed to read every single card that is played or revealed. And if your opponent can read, which I hope they can, if your opponent can read, then they're going to be able to pretty much figure out what you're doing. And if you're playing against good players, which you will be playing at the top tables, which that's where you're going to be if you're trying to win a tournament, which I hope you want to do. So you're going to be playing good players, and good players generally have a very good knowledge of the game. And if you have a good knowledge of the game, you can read your opponent's cards, like, you're not going to surprise them. And even if they don't know exactly like what all of your cards do, they're going to at least be able to play around some of the basic interactions. Like let's say you're playing, I don't know, like Ghost Tricks, right? Like, I don't have to know a lot about Ghost Tricks to know that you flip a lot of stuff face down. So, maybe I'll summon some Link monsters because they can't be flipped face down. And maybe that stops your Jack Frost, that stops your, I don't know, whatever other cards that Ghost Tricks play. I don't know, but I don't really need to know. Or another example would be something like Effect Veiler. Like, I remember I saw a guy talking about this last format. He was thinking about siding Effect Veiler, right? Because, quote unquote, they wouldn't see it coming. And I'm like, dude, they have Spiral Resort. Like, they don't have to see Effect Veiler coming because they have a card that directly counters it. Like, that card isn't good for a reason. Like, that is why they don't need to see it coming. And if you do have a Veiler, like you probably wouldn't even get to use it because they have a Resort. So it's like, there's a lot of reasons why the cards that aren't played. But even if Spirals didn't have Resort, which they're not going to have now, if your opponent's going to summon like a Spiral Double Helix and they're a good player, they're going to be thinking about what can stop their Helix. They're going to be thinking about Ash, right? So they're going to try to play around Ash as best as they can and maybe try to resolve Master Plan in another way. Because again, Master Plan is one of the more important effects, and the biggest thing about Helix was enabling Master Plan. And so even though you may have Effect Veiler to stop Helix, Effect Veiler doesn't stop Master Plan. So if they're setting up to play around Ash, it's also going to play around Veiler. And so it's like, even though you have that card that they're not expecting, that they don't have an answer for, because it's very similar to another card that they are going to be preparing for and playing around, it's going to pretty much stop that one card from being useful. And so it's like very rarely to where there is a card that can really truly surprise a good player and then counter them. It's just very, very rare. And I'm not saying it's not good to innovate, because innovations are very important, but at the same time you have to be smart about it. You have to be it's very complex. And a lot of times it comes down to a lot more than how good the individual card is, but also how good the player using it is, how similar it is to other cards of the format, and really just a lot of other things. So like, I think an example of innovation that was really cool was Jack Frost at YCS Melbourne. And so the thing with Jack Frost was like yeah, you might be playing around Ash, you might be playing around Ogre, you might play around Gamma, you might play around Cherries, but Jack Frost has a completely different condition. And so Jack Frost is good when attacking directly. And so at that time, there were no other cards that would stop you from attacking directly from your opponent's hand. And so it's like if you were attacking directly into a clear board, you were expecting to kill your opponent, meaning you would fall right into Jack Frost, it would flip your sleeper face down, and you'd be in a lot of trouble. And so that was an example of a card to where it would surprise players, right? Because it was something that you didn't expect. It was something that had a different trigger or a different condition than any other card in the game at the time. And so it gave you some really good short-term results. Now, in the long term, it doesn't give you good results, because if you look at it now, people can't really play. I mean, you guess you could play Jack Frost, but now people expect it. So now people aren't attacking with their sleeper into an open board. Now they're making more Link monsters. I've seen some people play like Mrs. Radiant and other, like, again, more Link monsters, because you can't flip them face down with Jack Frost. And so the game adapts so fast to where once people have knowledge of that and anything similar, they're going to start playing around it. And so even if like people stop playing Jack Frost and they became more cards that flip things face down, now those become weaker because of Jack Frost being known. And so it's like, as the format evolves, more and more cards lose their surprise factor. Not that I think the surprise factor really exists very much in the first place. And so be careful with that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Again, this was just like a really impromptu, unscripted, no filter type video. It's just something I was thinking while on the treadmill. Again, I was just like, what does it mean to actually build a deck? And again, I mean, my definition of it, something I really think is a very good definition, is to approximate the results of an infinite set of matches and then make decisions to improve the results in another infinite set of matches or subset of those. And then again, variance would be the difference between an infinite set of matches and then any subset of them. And then your goal in deck building is to decrease the variance. And so again, we talked about some of the different types of variance, some of the things that cause them, such as the nature of deck building, Yu-Gi-Oh being a statistical game, the variance of your individual deck, the variance of your opponent's deck, your opponent's actual deck choice, that's something we can't control, the die roll, and then mental and technical play. Because again, sometimes when deck building, it's easy to think your opponent will do one thing, they might choose to do another. But there are other causes for variance, and if you think of some, please leave them down in the comment section below. Again, I'd really be interested in hearing what you guys think. Again, I think this is a really good mental exercise, so please share your input. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. If you did watch this far into the video, let's do a hashtag why the hell not. If you watch this far into the video, let's do a hashtag I didn't quite think this through. So if you watch this far into the video, let's do hashtag, I don't know, Deck Doctor. Hashtag Deck Doctor down below. If you watch this far into the video, you're totally awesome if you did. Super appreciate it. But again, as always, I will see you guys in the next video. If you guys have any other requests, by the way, leave them down below. I'm interested in requests, any ideas you guys have. I'm pretty much willing to do anything. So yeah, leave them down below. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.